It's disgusting. What the? Check my car. What an unbelievable race again.
And what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Historic Hot Laps. Here we are starting December. The year's almost up, wrapping up a lot of racing like we have been the last month or so. Let's kick it off with some race recaps this week. We had a couple big events. Let's start off with Formula One in Qatar. Qatar's a pretty interesting course, 16 turns, gets real dusty real quick. Second to last race of the season. We already crowned a champion last time. We talked about Max Verstappen and his top 5 finish in Vegas. That sealed the deal for him on points for the championship. So we already know who's the champion going into this, but we're still looking at Constructors champion and then just, race results. So just want to start off by saying after the championship win, Max Verstappen got a new helmet that he debuted in Qatar. I believe he did have some issues with the helmet and had to switch it out, but the paint scheme on it's super, super sweet. It's white, gold, has the gold Red Bull on it, and then 4 stars on the back for a 4-time champion. So pretty cool. But going into FP1, Charles Leclerc had the fastest time in that Ferrari. Several cars hitting the runoff, a lot of dust issues. We talked about the helmet issue, a couple things going on there. This was a sprint weekend, so we did have a sprint also. So only one FP1, no FP2 or anything like that. This is the final sprint race of the season. Right out of the gate, McLaren takes over the 1 and 2 spot, and they hold on to it pretty well. Both Red Bulls struggled from the start. They did figure out a rhythm as they got going. And then Piastri ends up taking the win as Lando Norris disobeys the team orders to finish in first and give the win to Piastri after he did the same thing in when was that? Was it Brazil? No, I don't recall. But either way, good teammates there, ignoring the team orders and helping each other out. So that was pretty cool to see. Going into qualifying, Verstappen finally gets his stuff figured out with that car. Ends up taking the pole position, but that's just a temporary thing. The race stewards penalized Max for impeding on a lap for George Russell because George Russell was very upset about it and made a big stink with the Mercedes team about it. Everybody was on a warm-up lap, so George was treating it like a time lap, and I don't know. It was the video. It clearly looks like he impeded, but if they're stacking up to space out and give themselves room, I mean, Max was first in line, so that's more on Russell in my opinion, but it is what it is. Kind of a rough deal for Max overall, but Russell, Mercedes take the number 1 spot for the pole, and then Verstappen starts next to him. Verstappen had some good comments about it. Let's listen to those real quick.
There were 2 cars in front of me also making a gap, so I had to make a gap. And I knew that everyone was on a slow lap, not on a push lap. Yeah, and then I think George got excited. He wanted to pass and get around. That's fine. I mean, everyone, of course, tries to get their position, to have the best possible start to the lap.
Right. Moving on from there, let's talk about the race. Verstappen takes the lead right out of the gate. First corner puts the pressure on it. Norris gets in a spot to kind of follow him up. That puts Russell in third right out of the gate. So all the whining he did about qualifying within the first turn, he was in third place. Colapinto and Esteban, they tangled right away, causing a yellow locally. Albon and Stroll tangled, another yellow. Hamilton and Sainz both end up with punctures from all the random contact. Left a bunch of carbon fiber pieces on the track, and they both get punctures, causing all kinds of chaos for the top leading cars. There were so many penalties in this race, I can't really keep track, but we had some pit speeding penalties, some contact penalties, avoidable collision penalties. The racing was super aggressive in the main racing line, like we talked about. It gets real dusty on the off lines on that track. So the main line was definitely being fought over. The big one that really turned the table on the race was a yellow sector that was ignored by Lando Norris. He doesn't really have a good explanation for what happened, but speeding through a localized yellow put him in the penalty for a stop and hold. Overall, 35 seconds off his time, killed his race. Verstappen just kind of held things out front, kept it clean through all the chaos, and takes the win. So once again, Verstappen back on top for Red Bull, already crowned the champion, and then gets the race the following weekend. So overall, pretty awesome. Yeah, congrats to Red Bull and what they've got going on. We'll talk about them more in the news section, but overall, super cool to see. All right, let's talk about one of the coolest races of the season to end things off. Let's talk about the Turkey Night Grand Prix and the Bakersfield Swing. We'll start with Bakersfield, the USAC Midgets. This is all USAC National Midgets talk now. Bakersfield Raceway, the midweek race. Carson Macedo took a crazy tumble up on the cushion, gets out of his car on his own, but definitely ended his night. Kyle Larson was racing this one. He also had issues, had to return to the pits to fix some stuff, which opened up the opportunity for Tanner Thorson to take the win. That's his 30th national midget race win of his career, so that's super cool to see. But the big one, that's kind of the lead-up race, right? The big one's Turkey Night Grand Prix in Ventura. Super cool dirt track, right on the coastline. Going into it, a lot on the line for some of these guys. We decide a championship and everything else, but we're talking going into the mid-race of it. First part of it was all right. Mid-race, Buddy Kofoid ends up taking the lead. Defending winner from last year, Mr. Kyle Larson, was running 5th. Corey Day's putting the pressure on Kyle Larson. He overdrives Larson up towards the cushion, or trying to make a slide move up towards it, gets into Larson's left rear and causes Larson to spin. This, per the rules, if you spin, you get put in the back of the field. Even though Larson didn't really cause that issue, he could have given him maybe a little bit more room. It's hard to say. I mean, those midgets bounce all over, and they're, it's pretty wild. But he goes to the back of the field. That ruins kind of his chance to make things up and get the win again this year in this feature. So fast forward 15 laps to go. Corey Day takes the lead, holds off the field, ends up pulling it off, getting the race win. So congrats to him on that.
I think just not having Jesus to pass in front of me, that was a big one. So, hats off to Willie Kane and, Phil Durst and Bob Worth for giving me a good motor that, no one thinks would work, and it does. So, just thanks to Jessup and HP and Drake and everyone for working so hard this swing. I look forward to this swing so much, to just be able to come race and almost relax. It's not as, high pressure as, my normal stuff I'm doing. So, just really glad that Willie and I can finally get a couple down here, and, glad I can be one spot better here this year.
There was a pretty good one with 10 laps to go between JJ Yealy and Gasper. JJ was fired up. I had to just put this in here because his immediate interview after the situation was super entertaining and in true JJ fashion. So check this out.
Yesterday we spun out, or I got in a wreck. He hit me head on, wide open, never lifted, and then right there, I don't know what he was thinking. I mean, we're running 5th. There's 10 laps to go. Just threw a dive bomb in there and wrecked me. So, he's rookie of the year, but someone needs to beat the shit out of him. So if they don't stop me, I'll be the first one to fucking do it.
So there we go. Had some great comments on his situation and what he thought about it. He did come out and apologize for his language the next day, but it is what it is. It's part of racing, and that's what makes it so enjoyable sometimes. So this was the final race of the season. Like we talked about, this wraps up the USAC Midget Championship, to which we can congratulate Dustin Pursley on taking home the championship this year. Awesome, coming back from an injury. Congrats to him on the great season and keeping things alive. Just overall super cool to see. So
it's a big turning point. It's probably one of the best seasons that I've ever had driving a race car, and it just goes to show with everyone that I've been a part of, and USAC's been home for me for the last 4 or 5 years, and it's kind of developed me into the race car driver that I am, no matter if that's non-wing sprint cars, midgets, USAC Silver Crown, any of that stuff. It's a true testament to USAC and the development that they do for drivers to use it as a stepping stone, and just forever grateful for all of USAC to give me an opportunity to race, and definitely a bittersweet to cap off my USAC career with the championship, and look forward to dabbling a little bit next year and years to come.
Congrats to him, his family, his team, and that wraps up the midget races this year. We've got one more Formula One race, and then we're off for a couple weeks, and then we can kind of start to hype ourselves up for the NASCAR Clash at Bowman Gray here in, a month and a half, 2 months, I don't know. Count down the days and you'll drive yourself crazy, but that's where we're at with that. All right. Let's move over to some news. News section of the podcast here. Formula One news right out of the gate. We talked about GM coming over to F1 for 2026 and slowly getting the details on that. We know Mario Andretti's part of that as a member of the team in some capacity, whether it be just advisory role or whatever they're going to call it. But who will be the drivers? We're speculating amongst everyone online and in the media groups. But we do know that Colton Herta is at the top of the list as far as potential clients to jump over into that driver's seat. There's going to be quite a good free agency in the paddock come 2026 as well. But working on testing and stuff like that. I do feel like we're going to see something out of Colton Herta, so we can hope for a good crossover there, which would then open up a top spot in IndyCar. But we're talking 2026 here, so we'll just see how it all pans out. More Formula One. Alpine has confirmed that Jack Doohan is replacing Esteban Ocon in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix. I don't really know what to think of that other than we're looking at future moves maybe. Ocon hasn't been terrible. He's been, mid-pack and running all right. But Alpine's struggling, so they got to figure some stuff out. So from there, Red Bull rumors. It is rumored that Sergio Perez is going to leave at the end of the season. We know there was talk of replacing him mid-season and everything else, and he's still there. But the rumor's getting rather strong, and it looks to be that if he does get replaced, it will most likely be from Liam Lawson. He's been a Red Bull frontman for the last year or so. They've worked him into a lot of FP1s and things like that, and sub roles. So we'll see. But I do believe Perez is on his way out, and you'll see Lawson in that seat next year. Let's move over to NASCAR news. Tony B is going to make her full-time effort in the Craftsman Truck Series next season after running in ARCA this last year. She'll be joining Tricon Garage. Obviously, she's got a huge social media following. I believe she announced she's going to do Sports Illustrated Swimsuit Edition this year. She's working on it from all angles, but she is more than that. She is a good driver. So this will be a good crossover for her and for the sport. Be interesting to see. I know people have a lot of sour, Hailie Deegan post stuff, but Hailie Deegan didn't do terrible in the truck series. She did all right. It was more of a team thing than anything, but yeah, we'll dive more into that as the season approaches. But it's cool to see her moving from ARCA up to the Craftsman Truck Series. I think it's a good move for her, a good move for NASCAR and that team. So we'll just see how that goes. Let's move over to the lawsuit, 2311 and FRM. We talk about this every week, and we probably will till at least the start of the season, if not longer. But those teams have filed a new preliminary injunction after they pulled their last one, after NASCAR changed their open car requirements and the verbiage in that. So now they do have a new injunction in place. We haven't heard anything on that other than it has been filed, and there's some crazy timeline of 3 weeks or less for a response or rebuttal. So we'll just see how that pans out over the next week. Sounds like the next installment of Full Speed on Netflix, the behind-the-scenes documentary of NASCAR. If you haven't watched it, it's worth a watch. They did a great job with it. Really gives you some insight. You've got some great people in it that comment through the whole thing. Just awesome. But it does seem that that's going to be a little bit delayed. It's supposed to be out in April now. So April 2025, you should see that hitting Netflix. So keep a lookout for that. The last little bit of NASCAR news I've got for today's episode, Joe Gibbs Racing has announced the crew chief for Ty Gibbs. We talked about the shuffle we had over there. But Tyler Allen from the Xfinity Series is going to come over and run that program on that number 54 car for Ty. Tyler has only been on top of that booth in Xfinity for a little over one season. I think he was a fill-in, and then he took a full season this last year. But he managed to stack up 8 top finishes in that short time. So that'll be good for the team. And then obviously, if you're going to have Gabe Hart as the director of competition, they're going to be overseen by one of the best. So that'll be a good move. Should see some good progress out of Ty Gibbs. He had a good first half of the season anyway, but they kind of fell off like a lot of those JGR cars. But yeah, so we'll just see how that all goes. Let's move over to IndyCar news. Callum Hedge will join Able Motorsports to run the number 17 ride in NXT next season. Able Motorsports, obviously a great team in NXT. Good to see some new talent coming in there. Probably expect him to run in the top half of the field right out of the gate. So we'll see how that plays out for him in Able Motorsports. We're still hoping Able Motorsports can figure out a way to do some sort of combination entry for the Indy 500, but that'll be more towards May. We'll know about that. We did speak last week about Michael Cannon moving to Prema. Well, he has been titled in Prema as the new head of engineering. Probably a good career move with ties to F1, and who knows what type of unlimited budget that team will have at Cannon's disposal. But overall, that'll be a sweet move for him. Rumor has it that Valtteri Bottas, who was a podium chasing machine in Mercedes for years in Formula One, did turn down an offer from IndyCar for 2025. Obviously, we know he's out at the end of this season. We're not really sure where he's going to end up in Formula One, or if he will continue to run in Formula One. But I would imagine that this offer probably came from Prema, but who knows? I mean, he does have ties to some American sponsorships, so could have been anybody. And then finally, for IndyCar, Junkos Hollinger has made a staffing change, and they have announced that David Brown will now be their technical director. Another good positive change for the team. They've got some good momentum at the end of the season last year. I'm hoping that they can continue that with the staffing changes and everything else. Not only that, but we still don't know who's going to drive that second seat. I'm really hoping that it's Connor Daly. Obviously, there's still a lot of open-ended things. I don't know that we'll see anybody else really try to jump for it right now except for Connor, but you never know. And let's move over to a couple miscellaneous things here. The Chili Bowl's coming up. That's an exciting one. We know that's a giant midget race, and we love it. You get a week-long race, all kinds of craziness. Try to watch that if you can. If you can be there, even better, but it sounds like it's all sold out for the most part. Some early week seats still available, but the main race nights and the features are all sold out. Single seats available here and there, but currently rosters sitting at over 100 entries. Drivers from 4 different countries, 34 different states, 92 different cities. And we're not done adding drivers. I'll probably try to do another update next episode to see where we're at, but the number climbs every day. So just get excited for the Chili Bowl and what's going to happen this year. And we're going to see a lot of NASCAR crossovers like we talked about. Kyle Busch, Christopher Bell, Kyle Larson will be there. Yeah, it's going to be pretty cool to see. Finally, last little piece of news. We talked about Corey Day in the race recaps, but Corey Day set a record being the youngest driver to ever win the Turkey Night Grand Prix. This was the 83rd running of this race. Midget racing has been around for a very long time. 83 years of winners. He is the youngest, as when he won, he was 19 years old and 2 days. So 19 years and 2 days old. Youngest winner in history for the Turkey Night Grand Prix. And super impressive, might I add. So, yeah, just overall pretty sweet to see. And that wraps up our news stuff for this episode. As always, please like, share, subscribe. If you have any comments, hit us up at historichotlapse@gmail.com. Comment on the platforms. We're available everywhere you get your podcasts, so don't hesitate. Subscribe. We're working on some merch right now, hopefully for the next season. Maybe do a couple giveaways or something like that. But yeah, please tell your friends, share the episode, share this beautiful thing we love about motorsports.
In those days, people were blowing tires, and they didn't have detachable wheels. You actually changed the tire. So during practice in 1910, he said, we did an experiment. And I found that while we were capable of running over 80 miles an hour, if we ran 75, we could double the tire wear. So when we went into the 500, our strategy was, we're going to run 75 miles an hour. We don't care what anybody else is doing, and if they want to go by me and blow a tire, that's up to them. The newspaper the next day reports that Ray Harroun changed 4 tires and stopped 4 times. They didn't blow any tires. Ralph Mulford, who finished second, changed 14 tires. It was a very methodical approach that worked.
All right, everyone, let's do our history portion for this episode. Today we're going to talk about one of the legends of the sport, one of the first to do it, one of the most famous for what he did do. We got to give our credit to Wikipedia on a lot of this. There's a lot of old history. I had to do some research, but we're going to talk about Mr. Ray Harroun. Ray Wade Harroun, born January 12th, 1897, and passing away January 19th, 1968. Won the inaugural Indianapolis 500 in 1911, the very first guy to do it. He was born in Spartanburg, Pennsylvania. His father, a carpenter. He was the youngest child of several. Served in the U.S. Navy during the Spanish-American War. And we're going way back here. He did participate in the very first attempt at a land speed record, driving from Chicago to New York in 1903, fastest to do it, and then he improved his record, kept it, and improved it in 1904. He and 4 others drove in shifts nonstop, 76 hours from Chicago to New York, which in 1903 is pretty wild. Then again, doing it in 1904, and that record held for a couple years from there. Harroun was somewhat of a scientist when it came to the sport. He was nicknamed the Little Professor. He did a lot of pioneering work, creating things that are still used today in vehicles. Him and Howard Marmon, the Marmon Wasp, as it's known, in that 1911 Indianapolis 500, that race-winning car. Revolutionary design, being the first open-wheel, single-seat race car. So today we're still using open-wheel, single-seat race cars. That's what Formula One is. That's what IndyCar is. Midgets, everything. Everything spawned off of this design. So obviously May 30th, 1911 was a big day for that. Won the inaugural race there. Ray did a lot of racing. He was in 60 AAA sanctioned races from 1905 to 1911. He won 19 of those, most of those from 1909 to 1911. He wasn't a great competitor right out of the gate, but once he figured it out, he really did it. He pretty much drove for the Marmon automaker, which was based in Indianapolis. A lot of history back to that. He also drove a Buick in 1909, which he won a race in. He drove some custom one-offs known as the Harroun Custom and the Harroun Sneezer, which is pretty awesome, in the late 1900s. Harroun's race wins. We're talking 1910, a 100-mile distance race at the Atlanta Motordome. 1910, a 200-mile race, which was the Wheeler-Skeebler Trophy race. I can't make that up. The Indianapolis Motor Speedway. May of 1910, he did a 50-mile race, also at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. 3 races at Churchill Downs, which we know is the home of the Kentucky Derby back then. They also ran cars there. 3 races in Latonia, New Orleans, Los Angeles, Long Island, Memphis. He won stuff everywhere. He's quite the traveler, which is pretty awesome. Overall, at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, he has won 8 races, second most of any driver in all the history of the track. Johnny Aiken actually has 15 wins, and he holds the record, but Ray coming in second on that. During these years, we've talked about it in older episodes, but they were championship events, were kind of they were sanctioned by AAA, and then there was no real solid point system, but they kind of had a half-wit point system, but there's actual no year-long point system for the championship and no points awarded for the contest board. In 1927, they tried to revamp that. They retroactively assigned a bunch of stuff, and national championships were decided for the early years, and it was designated that Harroun would have been the 1910 champion had they tracked things right. So unofficial results, but official retroactively, he is a 1910 AAA contest board champion. One of the innovative things that's pretty awesome that Harroun did in 1911 at the Indianapolis 500, he rode solo, not with a mechanic, and ran what is now known as the rear view mirror in vehicles. He basically invented that so he could see the cars around him. A lot of the mechanics would spot and ultimately watch the cars, and then he went on to win that race. Average speed of 74 miles an hour. Harroun would not really race again after that. He kind of was retired as such going into that 1911 Indianapolis 500. But he took that number 32 yellow Marmon Wasp to victory, and that thing is cool. I've seen it. It's on display at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They travel it sometimes, but it's pretty cool to see the innovation. And just knowing that he invented the rearview mirror is pretty awesome. 50 years after the inaugural race in 1961, that was won by Mr. A.J. Foyt, and there was a little television program, which we've got a snippet of here, I believe, called I've Got a Secret, which was an old TV show, 1961. So check that out real quick.
Well, should I then?
Sure.
Indianapolis this year and Indianapolis.
The original, right. Got that.
And you're...
Well, you got him right. You've got him right. This is A.J. Foyt, who won this last week's Indianapolis 500-mile race. That's half of the secret, Bill.
Mr. Y won the first Indianapolis
Oldfield? No. Absolutely right. Ray Harroun. You don't want too much more.
Oh, yes.
Yes, Mr. Harroun won the first Indianapolis race 50 years ago, which is just marvelous.
At a tremendous speed at that time.
Absolutely. We'll bring that out. Now, Mr. Foyt, you certainly rode a thrilling and I must say somewhat frightening race last week. Now, what was your average speed?
A little over 139 miles an hour.
139 miles average. Now, Mr. Harroun, what was your average speed in the first Indianapolis race in 1911?
Just a little under 75 miles an hour.
Now, think of that. Our conception of speed has changed so radically in the past 50 years. But your rate was considered quite phenomenal at the time, was it not?
Well, we thought it was, yes.
It was more than a mile a minute in 1911. Sir, was the Indianapolis 500 as dangerous then as it is now?
Well, it isn't any more dangerous now, I don't think, than it was then. but it's still safer than it is riding on the highways with some of these hot rodders.
That is a matter of opinion. Now, sir, you drove a specially built and equipped racer. How much did your vehicle cost you?
About $2,000.
$2,000. By contrast, Mr. Foyt, how much did your Bose Seal Fast Special cost?
Around $30,000.
Around $30,000. May I ask you, what makes a man want to go into a race that is so obviously and so consistently dangerous?
Well, anytime you travel, there's a high rate of speed, it's a little dangerous. But you take the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, for instance, the racetrack is a real safe racetrack, and, they have guards and everything that control it. And actually, if it was real dangerous, I don't think I'd be out there. So I don't consider it to be so dangerous myself.
Both of these gentlemen say that it's not dangerous. An insurance salesman will tell you that their rate of insurance is about twice what it costs us to drive on the highway. We are honored to have you both with us tonight. The 1911 and the 1961 auto racing champions. Your money and your Bristol Myers gift package will be waiting for you off stage. We're very proud.
Going into post-racing, Harroun continued his engineering work with Marmon and later with Maxwell Racing. In 1916, Harroun started his own automobile company in Wayne, Michigan called the Harroun Motor Car Company. World War I kind of folded that for him, so it was a very short-lived event. But he does hold some legendary status in Wayne, Michigan for his efforts there and in Indianapolis. 1927, he joined the engineering team over at Lincoln Products. He continued to work in the automotive industry until he retired at the age of 79. And then he passed away January 19th, 1968. So lived a fulfilling life as a motorsports legend, inventor, creator, engineer, little professor as they call him. Awards, he's got the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Hall of Fame in 1952. Obviously, being the first to win that race, he's going to be ingrained in that forever. Motorsports Hall of Fame of America in 2000 and the Michigan Motorsports Hall of Fame in 2010. So a few awards there, but overall just a great career, great asset to have in motorsports. So Ray Harroun, we do appreciate what you've done for the sport. And that pretty much wraps it up for us today. As always, appreciate you tuning in. Hope everyone's having a great holiday season. We will probably have one more episode this year. Hopefully it'll be a special one we're working on. But aside from that, appreciate you listening. Like, subscribe, share with your friends, comment. historichoutlaps@gmail.com. All the good stuff on socials. We're going to work to improve our social platform as time allows. And just keep this thing going. Let's keep the history going next year. And we got one more race in Formula One. So we'll check that out, and we'll be back with one more episode before the end of the year. Stay safe, and thanks for tuning in.
I was privileged to know him and sit with him, and he said, I never thought of myself as a driver. He said, I was an engineer. He doesn't have the second person with him that says, there's somebody coming up. He put 4 rods over the cowling. It was 3 inches tall and 8 inches across. He would drive. He'd look up and see what was going on behind him. He was the first person that actually put one on an automobile.
Get more speed by riding alone. The job of the mechanic in those days was to watch behind and notify the driver when other cars were trying to pass. They claimed that it'd be dangerous for me to ride alone, so I rigged up this little gadget.
Thank you for sharing your time with us. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Don't forget to follow us at Historic Hot Laps on X and all your other social platforms for the latest updates and sneak peeks into upcoming episodes. You can reach out to us directly at historichotlaps@gmail.com. Send us your feedback, questions, comments, opinions, and additional subject matter you'd like us to cover. Thanks for tuning in.